So I'm actually of the opinion that World War III began 2 years ago.
Have President Putin, he just said it's not Russia. I will say this, I don't see any reason why it would be.
We lost the information war the second that Trump gained office, basically. We lost the information war then, but we should start fighting back now. This is super interesting. All right. This is why my feelings on freedom of speech, I do think that is a really good principle to hold. You know, having freedom of speech is a good thing to have. But also, let me just say, my biggest, counter to that is, why the are we not doing what, China and Russia are doing to us, to them? And if we are not doing that to them, why are we at least not, stopping them from continuing to do it to us? Would it mean violating parts of the First Amendment? Maybe. I actually don't know. Banning TikTok would be one of those actions, probably. But Jesus Christ, they've got us by the balls in terms of the information war. We lost the information war the second that Trump gained office, basically. We lost the information war then, but we should start fighting back now. Why the are we allowing these dudes? Why the are we allowing these dudes to come into our internet space, to post all the dumbass little comments that they want? Why are we allowing them to do that to our citizens, to make them hate our government, when we could just not? They're not allowing our media to go into their country. They're not allowing any Western influence to change the ideas of their people. Why the are we allowing them to do it to us? That's my biggest anti-First Amendment opinion. At a certain point, we do got to look out for us, and we are not looking out for us. We're allowing ourselves to get absolutely cucked for no reason. May I link one philosophy-related video of this stream? It depends on what it is, but I do want to watch this first because this video is awesome.
Are we fighting World War III right now? Not only are we fighting it, it started in 2014. I first admitted to this back in March of 2022, 1 month after Russia invaded Ukraine.
A no-fly zone might be a moral imperative, but we have to be aware of the consequences that will happen day one. We also have to understand that World War III may have already started and we're just delaying the inevitable.
And I touched on it again when I went on the Destiny podcast, and I touched on it again when I went on Sebastian Gorka's radio show, where I said...
Are you kind of fed up, Ryan, with the World War III is about to begin crowd? Because this has been a drumbeat for months now.
So I'm actually of the opinion that World War III began 2 years ago.
Ooh, okay.
It began when Russia invaded Ukraine.
Interesting. Expand.
Absolutely. So I could even go back even further and say that it probably started in 2014 when President Obama did not stand up to
the Crimean invasion.
To the Crimean invasion. Now, if all this talk of World War III makes you want to pull out your hair, have I got the solution for you? I started shaving my head back when I was an infantry platoon sergeant. It was just easier.
Listen, if you're balding, go get Keeps. Use keeps.com/Ryan Macbeth. I don't like skipping past people's bag getting, but I don't want to spend forever on, 2 videos.
Let's talk about World War.
Remember this? What is this? Very quick.
President Trump, you first. Just now, President Putin denied having anything to do with the election interference in 2016. Every U.S. intelligence agency has concluded that Russia did. My first question for you, sir, is who do you believe? My second question is, would you now, with the whole world watching, tell President Putin, would you denounce what happened in 2016, and would you warn him to never do it again?
So let me just say that we have 2 thoughts. You have groups that are wondering why the FBI never took the server. Haven't they taken the server? Why was the FBI told to leave the office of the Democratic National Committee? I've been wondering that. I've been asking that for months and months, and I've been tweeting it out and calling it out on social media. Where is the server? I want to know, where is the server, and what is the server saying? With that being said, all I can do is ask the question. My people came to me, Dan Coates came to me, and some others. They said they think it's Russia. I have President Putin He just said it's not Russia. I will say this: I don't see any reason why it would be, but I really do want to see the server. But I have confidence in both parties. I really believe that this will probably go on for a while, but I don't think it can go on without finding out what happened to the server, what happened to the servers.
Jesus Christ. I don't know how. I don't understand how people like look at him and hear statements like that. And then they're like, yeah, no, this guy was like never like too friendly to Russia. What are you talking about? He was never too friendly to Russia. When all of our intelligence agencies blocked by other job. Like, how do you get past that? You have to remember that our media is very gay. Well, yeah, that's why I said, like, I don't know exactly what the, like, implications are, like, First Amendment wise, or if it would even be possible, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Like, I already said that. What I don't understand is, I guess I understand it, like, for the most part. I just think it's super stupid. I just think it's stupid.
Of the Pakistani gentlemen that worked on the DNC. Where are those servers? They're missing. Where are they? What happened to Hillary Clinton's emails? 33,000 emails gone, just gone. I think in Russia they wouldn't be gone so easily. I think it's a disgrace that we can't get Hillary Clinton's 33,000 emails.
Yeah, because Russia would just concoct them up. They would just pretend that they had some, and then they would prosecute someone for it. Because they're an authoritarian state led by one guy that you can't say anything against.
Great confidence in my intelligence people, but I will tell you that President Putin was extremely strong and powerful in his denial today.
Okay, let's keep going.
War I and World War II. World War I, then almost universally known as the Great War or the...
Hold on. Putin is not a direct threat to your average American citizen? Yeah, I don't think I've ever said anything contrary to that. My problem is that Putin is a direct threat to... Putin is a direct threat to the, like, country of America. Putin is a direct threat to our way of life. He is a direct threat to what we hold as, what's the word I'm looking for? As common values about liberalism, about freedom of speech, about all of this, because they want to destabilize us. They've openly admitted to this. The actual Nazis that are, you know, the, what do you call them? The Wagner group? You know, the people that are like actually Nazis, founded by a Nazi, that all the lefties want to pretend like it doesn't exist. I accidentally opened. Let me get rid of this. Go away. So is Putin a threat to the average American? Just chilling and grilling? No. Is he a threat to everything that makes that average American's life, you know, decent on average? Yes.
The World War started on August 1st, 1914, when Germany declared war on Russia, and then 2 days later on France. But it had its roots going back 2 months previously to the June 28th assassination of Archduke Ferdinand. You could even say that the seeds were sown back in 1871 after the Franco-Prussian War, when France lost its territory of Alsace-Lorraine to Germany. So what were the primary features of the First World War? Well, it featured multiple actors and theaters of war. It introduced new weapon systems like the submarine and poison gas, featured economic warfare waged using blockades, sanctions, and contraband lists, and all sides used propaganda to justify their involvement. With World War II, which at the time was often just called the War, or in the Soviet Union and modern-day Russia, the Great Patriotic War, that started on September 3rd, 1939, when Germany invaded Poland. America entered the war on December 8th, 1941, after Japan bombed Pearl Harbor, but Europe had already been fighting for 2 years, and technically there was fighting going on in Asia for 4 years. So you could say that the seeds of the European conflict go all the way back to World War I, when the Treaty of Versailles tried to hobble and humiliate the Germans. So what were the main features of World War II? You had multiple actors and theaters of war, new weapon systems like strategic bombing and ballistic missiles, global economic warfare using blockades, sanctions, contraband lists, and who can forget the propaganda. Now, it wasn't until late 1944 that Americans started...
Trump's policies, though, weren't pro-Putin. Him joking with Putin isn't the same as anything materially beneficial to Russia, and none of the investigations showed he had financial compensation. You're... Okay, but here's what I'm trying to say to you. Russia did get something beneficial they achieved their goal. Their goal was to radicalize people and create instability in the United States, in Western countries, in NATO-aligned countries, to spread disinformation so that we couldn't react to anything that Russia was doing. That was their goal. And as evidenced by our total reticence to send any money, any weapons to Ukraine without first getting, kicked in the nuts over and over and over by our European allies, like England, who's like, oh, you guys want challengers? Here's some challengers. Oh, you guys want some long-range missiles? Here's some missiles. Oh, you want to shoot those missiles into Russia? Go for it. We had to be dragged, kicking and screaming because the people in Congress have been actually propagandized against our own government, against our own interest. Russia got what it wanted. I agree. Like, anyone that says that Trump got financial compensation from Russia, like, there hasn't been any evidence for that. People shouldn't be making that claim. I agree. There's no proof that Russia directly changed the votes or anything like that, that Trump was directly, this is my understanding, I could be wrong here, he could have had something there that I just don't remember, right? But I don't remember him having any direct communications with anyone in Russia. I think maybe Jared Kushner or Don Jr. did, but I can't remember for sure, so I don't want to make the strong claim, right? Oh my God. No, I'm not responding because you went from having reasonable questions to retard mode. No, ivermectin does not help with COVID. Spin from our government does not equal disinformation. And also, a lot of the extreme takes on the left, it's not just extreme. They're not trying to make right-wing extremists. They're also doing this on the left. They're using left-wing accounts as well to, they're not trying to make us more right-wing. They're trying to make us incapable of communicating with each other, of functioning as a country. That's the claim. So even if they're leftists, it doesn't really matter for the purposes of what I'm saying. Even if there is leftist disinformation, that goes to the point that I'm trying to give to you. That they're trying to sow disinformation so hard, they're trying to radicalize us against each other, not for the benefit of any one political party in the United States, just so that we don't get along. Domestic policy narratives. That is actually the first time you've ever worded a criticism that is reasonable and fair. And I probably could be more critical of it, but I also can't find anything to disprove the narratives that are being put out. Unless it's on its face ridiculous, but
started calling World War II World War II. In fact, my copy of the Pictorial History of World War II has a copyright date of 1944. It was being written as the war was still underway. Now, the first use of the term World War III can be found in this issue of Time magazine from November 3rd, 1941. You see, Germany had pushed the UK across the English Channel in 1940, and the two sides just kind of glared at each other while Germany invaded Russia and Yugoslavia and Greece while simultaneously bombing London. But one could say that the war was technically over. So it was thought that Germany would get bogged down in Russia and then try to establish some kind of peace as it built up their navy for the next fight. So some people thought that World War II was already finished, and World War III would be that great push into Europe. The term World War III pops up in the New York Times on February 10th, 1945, from an anti-war group known as the Society for the Prevention of World War III. Here they warned that a Soviet-backed coalition of self-proclaimed anti-national socialists made up of former German officers should not be recognized as part of the legitimate German Reconstruction government. So the term was used with the assumption that there would be a Third World War with Germany as the aggressor again. And in another article, this time on May 2nd, talks about how Stalin was the only real victor in Asia, and that makes World War III over Russian domination of Asia an almost certainty. Then on October 9th, 1945, General George S. Patton claimed that another war was inevitable. Although he refused to speculate with whom and when, it would probably be started by a madman who claimed outrage. Sound familiar? By December 7th, 1945, General Hap Arnold, the man who devised the strategic bombing campaign...
This guy is reaching hard, honestly. We haven't even gotten to the claim yet. This guy's just drawing the parallels, and then he'll give the actual full take in a second.
over Germany.
Oh, you've watched it? I don't think it's a reach. I think it's like, again, the entire point of his take is we don't have a clear defining line because there are disagreements across different countries, and depending on the historian of what was the beginning point of World War II or of the First World War. We don't have any like hard consensus on that. It's largely said to be, September of 1939, Hitler invades Poland, but there was a lot happening before that. There was a lot leading up to that. So that's what the point is. Less that, we need to start putting troops on the ground or anything. Just like there is a solid argument to be made here that this is happening.
Japan advocated that the North Pole would be important in the next Great War. And keep in mind that back then, nuclear weapons were delivered by bombers, and the shortest route to the Soviet Union was over the North Pole. So the specter of World War III has been around since the end of World War II, although it implied conventional conflict. The first associations with nuclear weapons came in 1950, when the Daily Worker, a local Chicago communist newspaper, accused President Harry S. Truman of trying to convert the conflict in Korea into World War III. Funny thing, the actual article ends with the words, "Hands off Korea, Korea for the Korean people, and America for the American people, end the lockout of China and the USSR and the United Nations, outlaw the atom bomb, prevent World War III." You can see how something like this could be a tweet today. The words and accusations haven't even changed. By 1953, atomic scientists were warning that the Soviet Union had about 50 or so atomic weapons and World War III was most probable. The 1950s saw the advent of popular novels like Tomorrow and On the Beach and Alas Babylon, and now the notion of World War III and nuclear weapons were firmly entrenched in the public psyche. So let's look at the conflict in Ukraine. Some people say that the conflict started on February 24th, 2022, but not if you're Ukrainian. To understand the gravity of this claim, we must revisit the events of 2014. And that year started with Ukrainian turmoil. The Euromaidan protests led to the ouster of President Viktor Yanukovych, a move that Russia saw as a direct threat to its influence in the region. In response, Russian troops in unmarked uniforms moved into Crimea, seizing control of key infrastructure and government buildings. Following Crimea, the conflict spread to eastern Ukraine, the Donbass, where pro-Russian separatists, essentially supported by Moscow, engaged in a brutal war against Ukrainian forces. The war resulted in thousands of deaths and has displaced millions. So you could even say that World War III happened in Crimea back in 2014 when Russia took Crimea by force and the world responded with a shrug, maybe a couple of sanctions, everything but a gun. So what are the features of this current war? How does it match up to World War I and World War II? Well, we have multiple actors, essentially a coalition of the West versus Russia, Iran, China, and in some cases, North Korea. Although we don't really have multiple theaters, we do have 4 overseas theaters that are active 24/7 watching over this stuff: CENTCOM, Eurocom, AFRICOM, and SOUTHCOM. War is not just being fought on the land domain and the sea domain and in the air, but in cyberspace and in the information domain through pro-Russian influencers. We've seen new weapons like drones and loitering munitions, and of course we've seen economic warfare using blockades, sanctions, and contraband lists. And who can forget the propaganda? The 24/7 propaganda that spills out of computers into the brains of people who are terminally online. Now, nobody would argue that land warfare is a domain of warfare. It's been the case since the first caveman picked up the first spear and said, you know what? I really don't like how Thag is always in charge. And we fought on the sea since the Peloponnesian War. Air has been a domain of combat since World War I. You could even make the argument that space has been a domain of warfare ever since the first Gulf War, when the US was able to navigate the uncrossable desert of Iraq due to GPS satellites. Cyber has been a domain of warfare since 2007, when Estonia moved a bronze statue of a Soviet soldier from the center of the city of Tallinn to a World War II military cemetery. And Russia's response was a massive denial of service attack on Estonia's internet infrastructure. Today, as I speak, Russia is conducting influence operations to convince you that Ukraine is not worth supporting. Information war is a domain of warfare.
How do I debunk the claim Euromaidan was a coup by Victoria Nuland if I'm talking to one of those types? Because there's no evidence. Like Gas said, there's no evidence. The evidence listed for America having influence there, I mean, like, do we have influence there? Yeah. Did we cause it? No. Like, the idea that we caused it is insane. And you just ask for evidence. And then when they say the Victoria Nuland conversation, to say like, okay, what about what she said equals the U.S. starting the Maidan revolution, whatever protests? Yeah, their smoking gun proves the opposite of what they're claiming. Because what they're claiming is that the U.S. installed someone, but all they say directly in that thing that everyone cites is basically who they would prefer. And who they would prefer is essentially just like the guy who was the main opposition leader already. And he was preferable to anybody else because he could actually be worked with. He was more aligned with U.S. interests, but we were reacting. We were reacting to what was happening in Ukraine, not the drivers.
That weaves its way through all the other domains. So you can certainly say that we are at war with Russia right now. Russia is fighting against the minds of the American people. It is a war to divide us, a war to convince you that standing up to the bear will cause World War III that we see in the movies. But if you look at the information domain, we're already at war. We're already at war with Russia. You know, I read this book, Nuclear War by Annie Jacobsen, and the book left me feeling very afraid. Not that there was going to be a nuclear war, but because our idea of World War III and nuclear war is so intertwined that the book could be used by Russia to threaten the West. As in, like, don't stand up to Russia because what if Russia goes nuclear? So let's talk about that. Let's talk about what go nuclear would actually look like. What advantage does a nuclear weapon give an adversary? Now, back in the 1960s, the battlefield use of nuclear weapons made sense. We really didn't have the kind of precision-guided weapons that could, let's say, take out a bridge. So if the Soviets were advancing and we needed to drop a bridge, yeah, a nuclear weapon delivered by a fighter made sense because you didn't have to be that surgical. But today, on the modern battlefield, nuclear weapons are really only good for about 5 things. Nuclear weapons can be used to create a gap in enemy defenses that the enemy would then push through the gap to break through. Nuclear weapons could be used to stop an advance of an enemy force. Nuclear weapons could be a good choice for destroying a command bunker that is really deep underground. Nuclear weapons would be a good choice for destroying an aircraft carrier battle group. And nuclear weapons would be a good choice for destroying an amphibious landing or a major river crossing. So let's look at all those options. Could Russia use a nuclear weapon against Ukrainian lines to create a breakthrough? Probably not. The ISR, intelligence surveillance reconnaissance systems, are so good that any buildup of troops would be very difficult to hide. And you need that massing of troops because you want to be able to break through and then sustain that breakthrough. And right now, massing anything more than a company of troops or armored vehicles puts you at an incredible visual, thermal, and signal signature, which would be detected, and these vehicles would be destroyed through precision fires. So could Russia use a nuclear weapon against advancing Ukrainian forces if they broke through Russian lines and tried to cut off Crimea? Again, probably not. Ukraine suffers from the same problem as Russia. They just can't mass troops without being detected, and you've seen how hard it is for Ukraine to make a breakthrough. So could Russia use a nuclear weapon on a Ukrainian underground command bunker? Again, probably not. Now, when I say underground command center, I'm talking about like NORAD in Cheyenne Mountain or the Hang Seng Military Command Center in Taiwan. That kind of target for command and control just isn't really a valid case because it doesn't really exist in Ukraine. So could Russia use a nuclear weapon against a Ukrainian naval battle?
Yeah, I don't think the more I learned about what nuclear war entailed and what would happen to a country that did bring in like a nuke to whatever the they're doing, I am ultra convinced that a nuclear war is not going to happen in my lifetime at all. The amount of infrastructure and maintenance by a nuclear weapon requires is really huge, and Russians proven that they don't do maintenance. Well, see, that's not even the argument that I would make, because I would say that, like, if there's one thing that they do want to do, it is maintain those nukes. That's probably where like most of their military budget actually went. That and waste.
Group? Well, Ukraine doesn't have a navy. And that makes my whole point about using a nuclear weapon to stop a beachhead on an amphibious landing kind of moot as well. So there's really no tactical reason to use a nuclear weapon in Ukraine. Now, if NATO intervened, could some of those use cases become valid? Maybe. But the one thing people tend to forget is that NATO has nuclear weapons too. And President Vladimir Putin knows that any nuclear weapons used by Russia would almost guarantee the use of nuclear weapons from NATO. Dictators tend to want to stay in power. And nuclear conflict, even if it's limited to battlefield use, could see the end of President Putin as a leader. I'll give you one more possible scenario. The People's Republic of China certainly may have warned President Putin not to use a nuclear weapon because it could set a precedent. Remember that last use case for a nuclear weapon where a nuclear weapon could be used to stop an amphibious landing force? Well, if China decided to invade Taiwan, they are going to have a heck of a beachhead with a long supply line. So they probably aren't too keen on the normalization of tactical nuclear weapons. So are we fighting World War III right now? In many ways, yes. The conflict in Ukraine shares many features with the world wars of the past. Multiple actors, new weapon systems, economic warfare, pervasive propaganda. The battles are not just fought with guns and missiles, but with information and influence. The seeds of this war were sown long ago with the annexation of Crimea in 2014 and subsequently the conflict in eastern Ukraine. And the West's response has largely been economic and diplomatic, avoiding direct military confrontation. But we're still at war. The use of nuclear weapons is unlikely, given the strategic and political implications. A modern battlefield and global political landscape makes such a decision fraught with peril for any nation, including Russia. We're in a new kind of war, one that's fought in cyberspace and through the media instead of just on the ground. The aim is to influence minds and shape perceptions, divide and conquer through misinformation and fear. Thank you guys for watching.
It's me.
All right. It's $1 million to, yeah, of course it is. But I'm pretty sure that, like, if there is one thing that Russia is investing in, it's probably those nukes. I think it's obvious. Well, it's not obvious in the way that you would think, because if you don't know anything about like the tactical implications or anything like that, then you're more likely to think that it's very possible that we do have a nuclear launch, and all of the reasons for Russia to use a nuclear launch, they're valid. It's just, are they valid and also based in reality? No. But it's just a case of like people don't know what they don't know. Well, welcome. For people that are new, if you're watching on YouTube or if you're watching on Kick, I'm Sondsol. I am a political science student. I like to talk about politics. I like to argue about politics. We talk about all sorts of fun things on here, like drama and politics. And I like to argue with people and chat about a lot of different things. Like, comment, and subscribe. I don't like to shill. Also,